Hello and welcome back to another EDH Deck. My name is Jarvis. Before we get into this video, I just want to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe. You could go and find all my links to my Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Discord, all that fun stuff in the link tree in the description of the video, as well as a link to the deck tech in the deck list in the description of the video. For today's video, I'm doing something a little bit different. I built on a budget. We are doing Myrel Shield of Argive on a $100 budget, and it is Soldier Travel. So Myrel Shield of Argive is a legendary creature human soldier that costs 3 and a white. They are 3 and a 4, 3 power, 4 toughness, and they have the ability that during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifact creatures and enchantments, and that whenever they attack, you create X11 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. So the main goal of this deck is to go and play lots of soldiers or soldier creating things and protect Myrel so that they could go and swing and create lots of soldiers. So, soldiers, 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 that's what the deck is about. We have Baird, Steward of Argive, which is a 2 and 2 white. For a Vigilant Soldier, that makes it that creatures that can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures to give yourself a little protection. Bastion Protector is 2 and a white, gives commander creatures you control +2/+2 and indestructible. Call the Copper Coats is 2 and a white, has Strive, where it makes it that it costs 1 and 1 white more for each target past the first, so you can target all of your opponents. And you choose any number of target opponents, and you create X11 white human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures those opponents control. So as you can tell, it's not just soldier creatures, it's also things that make soldiers. Captain of the Watch is 4 and 2 white, vigilant, human soldier. Other soldier creatures you control get +1/+1 and have vigilance. And when they enter the battlefield, you create 3/1/1 white soldier creature tokens. Cathar Commando is 1 and a white with flash, and has the ability to pay 1 and sacrifice it and destroy target artifact or enchantment. Also another soldier. Court Street Denizen is 2 and a white, and whenever another white creature enters the battlefield under your control, tap target creature an opponent controls. So, unfortunately, those soldiers that Myrel creates aren't uh, white, they are colorless, but we do have other things that make white creatures. Defiler of Faith, 3 and 2 white, vigilant, and as an additional cost to cast white permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost a white less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of white mana you pay. So, for instance, if a spell costs 2 and 2 white, you pay 2 life and 1 white to go and cast that spell. And then whenever you cast a white permanent spell, you get a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Gavany Dawnguard is 1 and 2 white, has Ward 1. If it's neither day or night, it becomes day when it enters the battlefield. And whenever day becomes night or night becomes day, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is a way to generate card advantage, as we do have quite a few creature cards in our library or in our deck that cost 3 or less mana. Guardian of New Benalia, 1 and a white, has Enlist, which means that when you attack with it, you could tap another creature you control that is currently untapped and does not have Summoning Sickness. And when you do, you add its power to Guardian of New Benalia's, and it attacks for that much. And whenever Guardian of New Benalia enlists a creature, you scry 2. And it also has the ability to discard a card, and it gains indestructible, but then you also have to tap it. Horn of Valhalla is 1 and a white. The important part to this is the sorcery side of the adventure. It's X white white, Ysgard's Call. Create X11 white soldier creature tokens. Now, it does have that awesome equipment side to it, where equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. We're going wide, we are creating lots of creatures, so we should be able to go and have a big chunker going in. Keeper of the Court is 3 and a white. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you do, you get to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. And at the beginning of their end step, if that player controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a basic Plains card, put onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Lena, Selfless Champion, is 4 and 2 white. She's a human knight. But when they enter the battlefield, you get a 1/1 white soldier creature token for each non-token creature you control. And then you can sacrifice her, and every creature you control with power less than Lena's gains indestructible until end of turn. Loxodon Gatekeeper is 2 and 2 white. Artifacts, creatures, and lands your opponent's control come into play tapped. Martial Coup is X white white. You get to create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. And it also doubles as a board wipe if you pay 5 or more into X, because then it destroys all other creatures other than the tokens you created. Audric Lunar Marshal is 3 and a white. It's a human soldier that at the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn. If your creature you control has first strike, but the same is also true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. Then we have the other Audric, Master Tactician, 2 and 2 white. Also a soldier, has first strike. And then whenever Audric and at least 3 other creatures you control attack, you choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. Prava of the Steel Legion is 2 and a white. As long as it's your turn, creature tokens you control get +1/+4. So those 1/1 soldiers you create off Myrel become 2/5 soldiers. And then for 3 and a white, you could create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. Rescue Retrievers, 3 and 2 white, has Flash. It's a dog soldier, and it's one of the most adorable dogs that you will ever see in Magic. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other soldier you control. And you prevent all damage that would be dealt to other attacking soldiers you control. Reverent Hoplite is 4 and a white. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you create a number of 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens equal to your devotion to white. Sanctuary Warden is 4 and 2 white. It enters the battlefield. It has flying, which is very important. And when it enters the battlefield, it enters with 2 shield counters. And whenever it attacks, or whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may remove a counter from a creature planeswalker control. If you do, draw a card and create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. So we do have minor +1/+1 counter synergies in here. So you can go and remove the +1/+1 counter off of one of your creatures to draw a card and create a green white citizen creature token. So it's another way to draw some cards, get some more incremental value. Selfless Squire is 3 and a white, has Flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you get to prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. And whenever damage that would be dealt to you is prevented, you could put that many +1/+1 counters on Selfless Squire. Siege Veteran is 2 and a white. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, you get to create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. Spectrum Sentinel is 1 generic mana, has protection for multicolored, and whenever a non-basic land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you gain 1 life. So I put this into the deck because of the gaining incremental life off non-basic lands, especially if you're playing against multicolored decks. They tend to be very greedy on the mana basis, playing non-basic lands just to make sure they have all their mana available. But that protection from multicolored is also quite important because there's times where you have big beaters, like in previous decks, Paco, who's a Gruul dog with trample. This has protection from it, so he can just block. I'm sorry, he doesn't have trample, he just has saves, but he can block that big dog that grows and grows and grows. Sun Gold Sentinel is 1 and a white. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So a little bit of graveyard hate. Has Coven, which Coven, the ability is if you control 3 creatures with power, with 3 different powers, you have Coven. It costs 1 and a white to activate, and you choose a color. Sun Gold Sentinel then gains hexproof from that color until end of turn, and can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, is 1 and a white. First strike, non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Thalia, Heretic Cathar, is 2 and a white. First strike, creatures and non-basic lands and your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. And Thalia's Lieutenant. You see lots of Thalia. 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control, which I don't know if you've noticed, a lot of our soldiers are also humans. And whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia, on Thalia's lieutenant. Valiant Veteran is 1 and a white. This one is really good. It has 2 different abilities. Both are important. It acts as an anthem for your soldiers, giving them all +1/+1. But it has an ability when it's in the graveyard for 3 and 2 white, where you can exile it from your graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on each soldier you control. Now we have card draw. As you can tell, some of our soldiers had card draw, but this is the other ways that we have to draw cards in the deck. Rumor Gatherer is 1 and 2 white. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, scry 1. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you get to draw a card instead. So when you're attacking with Myrel themselves, when they attack, automatically have 1 creature enter the battlefield. But it's possible that they can have 2, 3, 4. For each of those creatures, you get to scry 1 on the first one. On the second one, you get to draw a card. On the third, fourth, fifth, whatever, you get to keep scrying to go and keep manipulating the top of your deck to get the next card you want. Skull Clamp is 1 generic. Equipped creature gets +1/-1. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. And it has equip 1. A lot of our soldiers are going to be 1/1s, so this lets us draw cards by sacrificing those soldiers. Takasha's Welcome is 2 and a white. Whenever 1 or more creatures with mana value 3 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This only triggers once each turn. So if you have ways to go and create tokens on your opponent's turns, you can trigger this on their turn as well. And it is an enchantment. Welcoming Vampire is 2 and a white. Vampire with flying, very much like Takasha's Welcome, except it's whenever 1 or more creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control instead of mana value 3 or less. You get to draw a card. It also only triggers once each turn, but yet again, if you go and make tokens on your opponent's turn, you trigger it again. Then we have Protection. As I said earlier, protecting Myrel is also very important. And protecting your board is very important as well. We have Akroma's Will, which is 3 and a white. You get to choose one if you can control your commander as you cast a spell. You choose one. If you control your commander, you get to choose both. This doubles as both protection and a way to win the game. The first mode is creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until end of turn. The second way is creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until end of turn. So if you have your commander out, you could swing all out with your creatures with the Chroma's Will on the battlefield and win the game because they won't be able to block most of the creatures unless they're playing a colorless deck. Angelic Guardian is 4 and 2 white. Flying, whenever 1 or more creatures that you control attack, they gain indestructible until end of turn. Guardian of Faith is 1 and 2 white, has flash, vigilant, and when it enters the battlefield, any number of other target creatures you control phase out. Very good to play this in response to a board wipe. Mother of Runes. We all know what Mom does. It's a 1 white mana. You can tap it and give a creature protection from a color until end of turn. Settle the Wreckage is 2 and 2 white. It's an instant. When you cast a spell, you get to exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search his or her library for that many basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle their library. So, they do an all-out Alpha Strike on you, you settle them. They lose all their creatures, but they go and get basic lands. Swiftfoot Boots, 2 mana, equip cost 1. Equip creature has hexproof and haste. Unbreakable Formation is 2 and a white. It gives all of your creatures indestructible until end of turn, but it has addendum, meaning that if you cast a spell during your main phase, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures and they gain vigilance until end of turn. Whisper Silk Cloak is 3 generic mana. Gives equipped creature unblockable and equipped creature shroud. It has equip 2. Then we have removal. Both single target removal and board wipes, as well as graveyard removal, because that is also very important. We have Austere Command for 4 and 2 white. Choose to destroy all artifacts, all enchantments, creatures with mana value 3 or less, creatures with mana value 4 or greater. Calamity's Wake is 1 and a white. Instant, exile all graveyards, and then players can't cast non-creature spells this turn, and you exile Calamity's Wake when it resolves. Disenchant is 1 and a white. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Generate script is 2 and a white. Destroys any target permanent, including lands. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Kabir Takedown is 1 and a white. Instant. It deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. Also has a nice ability of being a land in the form of Kabir Plateau, which just is a tapped white mana source. Lay Down Arms is a single white sorcery, exiles target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes you control. I'm not putting the land base in the video, but you can go and look at the deck list. We are playing quite a few basic planes. I think something like 25 of them. Its controller then gains 3 life. Path to Exile is a single white. Instant, exile target creature. Its controller may search the library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Return to Dust is 2 and 2 white. Instant, exile target artifact or enchantment. But if you cast this during your main phase, you can exile up to an additional target artifact or enchantment. So it's a 2-for-1. Soul Guide's Lantern. 1 generic. When it enters the battlefield, you get to exile a target card from a graveyard. You could sacrifice it to go and exile each opponent's graveyard, but if their graveyards aren't being that threatening, you can pay 1 and sacrifice it and draw a card. Swords to Plowshares, single white, exile target creature. Its controller gains a life equal to its power. And then we have good stuff. Stuff that doesn't really fit into our other categories. Cathar's Crusade, 3 and 2 white. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. When you're playing tokens, this gets dumb fast. Halo Fountain, 2 and a white. This is one of our win cons in the deck. For a white and tapping it, you can untap a tap creature control and create a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. 2 white, tap it, untap 2 untapped creatures you control, draw a card. 5 white, tap it, untap 15 tapped creatures you control, you win the game. So this gives us more tokens, card draw, and a win the game effect. Mirror Entity is 2 and a white. Changeling. You pay X into its ability, and until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. In doing this, you get to go and make your soldiers very large. And if you have a chroma as well, make them unblockable as well and win the game that way. Rabble Rousing is 4 and a white. Hideaway 5, Enchantment. Whenever you tap with 1 or more creatures, create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens. Then if you control 10 or more creatures, you may play the exile card without paying its mana cost. When I mentioned the creature that cared about white creatures entering and then being able to tap other creatures, this is the main effect that we could go and tap multiple creatures at one time. Because, say you swing with 5 creatures, you get to create 5 1/1 green and white creatures, so you get to tap 5 of your opponent's creatures. The Hideaway is just a nice little add-on. The curve of the deck is rather low, so the free spell we're getting isn't going to go and be super impactful a lot of the time. Starlight Spectacular is 2 and 2 white. I saw this card, and I'm surprised that I like it because it is from Infinity, and that those sets don't really speak to me, but it has Parade. And for this, what the Parade mechanic is for this card is at the beginning of combat on your turn, you choose creatures you control 1 at a time until each creature you control has been chosen. Each of those creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature chosen before it. So, say you have 10 creatures. The first creature gets +0/+0. The next one gets +1, +2, +3 until you get the 10th creature, which gets +9/+9. So you get to go and incrementally grow your board. The more creatures you have, the larger that your creatures at the end of the line become, which is just really dumb, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. Sun Titan is 4 and 2 white. It's a giant with vigilance, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. As I said, our curve for the deck is rather low. We have a lot of cards 3 mana value or less, so we get a lot of stuff from our graveyard. Teshar Ancestors Apostle is 3 and a white. Flying, whenever you cast a historic spell, which historic spells, sagas, artifacts, and legendary permanents, You get to return a target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we do have quite a few legendaries because we have the Audrys, we have the Thalias, we have artifacts for mana rocks and stuff like that. So this does go and allow us to recur some important pieces to the game plan. And then the last section of this video is going to be the ramp. So mana rocks or other ways to ramp out. We have Arcane Signet, 2 mana, taps for a color in your commander's color identity. Commander Sphere, 3 mana, taps for a mana in your commander's color identity, plus you can sacrifice it to draw a card. Heraldic Banner is 3 generic. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a color. You will always choose white in this deck. And creatures you control get +1/+0, and you get to add 1 mana of the chosen color. Mindstone, 2 mana, tap it for a colorless, and for 1 and tapping it, you can sacrifice it and draw a card. Sol Ring, commander staple, you know what it does. Solemn Simulacrum, 4 generic. Sad Robot, when it enters, you get to go and look for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. And when it dies, you may draw a card. And finally, Strixhaven Stadium, 3 generic mana. Tap it, add a colorless, put a point counter on the stadium. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, you get to remove a point counter from the stadium. But whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, you put a point counter on it. And then if you have 10 or more point counters on it, you get to remove them, and that player loses the game. So, this card is one of my favorite mana rocks that has ever been printed because it has player removal stapled onto it. And when you're going wide in a tokens build, you should easily be able to trigger this at least once in the game. And it's a nice way to go and eliminate that problematic opponent because you just need that one creature to deal damage to him, or to them, and then the rest of the creatures can deal damage to any of the other opponents. But this is the deck that I have for you. Like I said, it is a $100 budget, so it's easily upgradable with cards like Esper Sentinel, Smothering Tithe, Monologue Tax, Akroma's Monument, Eldrazi Monument. So many things that you can do to go and upgrade this, but this one is a budget deck. So, and it is a soldier deck. So you are able to go and easily upgrade this deck if you do choose that you want to. But other than going and taking cards that would be out of budget and putting into the deck, what other changes would you make to it? What cards do you like that I added? What cards don't you like? Also, to keep in mind with the budget, it's based off of TCG Player for the $100 budget. So just keep that in mind. But until next time, everyone have a great day, and I'll see you next time.